I'm going to give Brother Ron Chills an opportunity to come in. Thank you so much, Ron, for coming in. And definitely feel free to ask Dr. Elihu what it is that you'd like to ask, or give us some insight from your perspective.
Hey, shalom, shalom. Thank you so much, Sister Ashanda. Been following your channel for some time now, and I really appreciate the content and open dialogues that you have on your channel. So I want to just thank the Most High for allowing you to just open up the panel for our brothers and sisters to speak, as well as the information you share. I follow as much of this broadcast as I can. I was multitasking. There's a lot of great information that came out. Ashanda, you asked a lot of great questions. So did the audience, and the brother Elihu, the advocate, from his medical background, was very honest in his dissemination of the information, striving to be objective at the same time. And I could tell that he does have an academic background. He's actually in the medical industry based on the way he answers the question. So, I mean, it's truly a blessing to have him here with us, and for him, his willingness to actually be able to open up and kind of share his insight in regards to what's going on. So, and I know you was about to close out, Ashanda, so I don't really want to take up too much of your time, sis.
Oh, no, I really appreciate you come on as well. I definitely follow your work, and being that you are connected to my brothers and sisters, Jacoba, Sister E, and Dante, and all of them, I definitely appreciate all the work that you've been laboring to do over these years. So thank you so much, and definitely feel free to ask them some questions, and we're going to give you the time that you need.
Thank you so much. I mean, the entire concept in regards to the vaccination is a very sensitive subject, because as we can see, the reception rate amongst the public in the U.S. Is about less than 50% that have trust in this new Pfizer vaccination, and rightfully so. I mean, if you think about the last time a actual virus was rushed out to the public, that was your H1N1 vaccine that was rushed out, and because of the, swine flu, and people was really freaking out about it and everything like that in 2009. And it's interesting because rushing out that vaccine had adverse effects that about 10 years, not even 10 years, about 5 years later, when they did the research, they found out it was linked to several type of pathological ailments that was linked back to a certain batch of the H1N1 vaccination. So the public, has a distrust whenever there's a rush to the market in regards to a particular vaccination. Now, I've spoken this before. Me myself, I'm a naturopathic educator. So I'm not a virologist. I'm not an epidemiologist. However, I do have friends and associates that I do work with, and some of them are part of the program that I offer to the public, that I've conversed with and I've shared data with, and read through peer-reviewed articles, and mostly things that follow the gold standard, which is called the double-blind placebo case studies, which are the type of scientific articles that we read in regards to looking at how objective tests are done when comparing the efficacy of the mode of action of any element that we utilize for health, right? Whether somebody claims that elderberry can, help with the symptoms of the common cold, you have to say, well, what peer-reviewed article have you read? What is the background of the researcher, the lead researcher on that? What lab was it tested on? What were the conditions, and so forth? You get a lot of those details in the article itself. So I've strove a lot to research this stuff to see if I find any nuances, because to me, there's big details in the small nuances, and some of those things actually get swept under the rug. Interestingly enough, there's something that I would like to share, because I think Elihu did a great job in disseminating a lot of good information in regards to the vaccination. And I don't want to really make this too lengthy, but there are some things that I would like to share. So, a disclaimer before I proceed, and I'm trying to be very careful because I'm trying to be as objective as I can. I'm not here to say vaccinations are bad or vaccines are evil and they're wicked. That's not what I'm here to say, right? That would be a very biased approach for me to say that. And that's too subjective, which goes to show that anything that I present will be, based from that particular disposition. And I don't want to pretty much put that out there. What I'm simply saying is that I believe that the public should be as well informed as possible in order for them to make the best decision as it pertains to something like this, which could be potentially life altering. Right. And I think that all the hidden hands should show what cards they're holding so that way the public is aware of it and they can make the best decisions. Now, looking at the success rate for coronavirus, and it's something that I've been speaking on since, spring, is 92%. And it's been pretty consistent. There's over a 90% success rate for people who do get it and they recover from it. A lot of the difficulties for people who are rushed to the hospital is because they have pre-existing conditions that exacerbate the coronavirus infection that they have, as well as people who get placed on a ventilator that already have pneumonia and other types of lung impairments that also causes them to fall victim to the coronavirus or COVID-19, which, like Elihu said, is the name for the disease. And they fall victim to that, right? When they're removed from off of the ventilators too early or too late. And you remove the muscle memory of the lungs from contracting and releasing. And then it becomes very problematic, when your alveoli sacs collapse on each other and, air cannot diffuse into the capillaries, and then you have this trauma in the lungs and a person pretty much, suffocates to death, So looking at the people that actually do get hospitalized is because there are a lot of other conditions that are involved around that. However, the majority of the people are not in the hospital who are infected with COVID. They are normally at home. And a lot of those people in that demographic are people of color. If you watch what's going on in New York City, you'll see Governor Cuomo he actually even speaks about this. And he says that, most of the people that they've seen trending as far as being infected with COVID-19 are people in the Black and brown communities because they don't have access to good health care. Most of them have a distrust of the medical industry and allopathic medicine. A lot of them don't take this seriously. And they say a lot of us are still socially interacting even after certain restrictions have been placed, that we're more liable to ignore those things. So we become more exposed. And, they try to make a link to poverty and not having access to previous vaccinations for like flu shots, even though you can get a lot of that for free, even on Medicaid. And he identified this, that's a big problem. And that's another issue that we have with our community is the fact that the susceptibility that we have to the infection of coronavirus is based on a lack of knowledge on how the virus actually works. And the interesting thing is, again, you heard Elder Elihu speak about the S protein, right? Because there are several proteins that make up various parts of the actual virus itself. The S protein is the one that allows entry into the cell itself, right? And we see the mutation as far as where the virus comes from by looking at other coronaviruses in the wild and other species of animals and see how through mutations from a bat to a pangolin or some kind of intermediate animal into us, we see the various mutations and then how it through various, I would say, defects is able to evolve and adapt to entering into our cells and our body. And the thing is that most people, they don't really take health and wellness seriously. A lot of people think, I could just get a vaccine and I'll be good. And that's not how things work anymore. As you can see, we've toughed it out from February all the way to December. So we're talking about 11 months that people had to go without a vaccination, right? A lot of people that I know who actually did have COVID, most of them recovered. I think I know maybe about 2 people who have passed away from COVID or was linked to COVID. And a lot of times it's because, they were rejected from getting access to proper health care. They were told to stay home, and their issue got worse. When things died down, they finally was hospitalized and they wound up succumbing to COVID-19. So I just want to show something on the screen just to show some information that's probably like swept under the rug or that's overlooked. And I think it's just a good way for us to be aware of what's going on, what's out there. So that way we can make better informed decisions. If you decide you're going to get a vaccination, that's totally up to you. In regards to me personally, that is not the direction I'm going. I'm against the vaccination for me And I'm just choosing not to take it. And like I was saying earlier in the chat, that they are hoping to get at least cooperation from 75 to 85% of the population in order for you to have herd immunity, right? So herd immunity is something that, it's a pretty much a perspective that if you vaccinate about 85% of the population, then the other 15% who are normally not exposed to the virus or conditions and where the virus can infect them, that over the course of time, and this doesn't happen once everybody's vaccinated, it takes time, right? Over the course of time, the 85% will have eliminated the virus, and the other 15% that are more vulnerable and have not been exposed won't get the virus, right? So if a lot of us decided we wanted to wait this thing out, and we decided, look, I'm going to go live off the grid for about a year, you know what I'm saying, till things get back to normal, till herd immunity hits, hey, that's an option you can choose to do, because the way things are set up now, the public health is top priority, in regards to, the concerns of the government today, so there's going to be a lot of regulations and things that are designed to keep you from traveling, right? Unless you get the vaccination, to keep you from going to your job, right? To keep you from enjoying sporting events and things of that nature, which also may require you to show that you've been vaccinated. Right. So things are going to be done because, again, in the public's eye, being a novel virus means that this, I would say, species of virus is normally not found in humans. Right. Coronavirus is nothing new. Coronavirus has been around for millions of years. Right. There's actually 4 major coronavirus strains that are actually in our population today. A lot of them cause the common cold. Some of them may cause flu-like symptoms, but they're common. However, in this case scenario, it is a species-specific virus that has jumped and made its way to us. That is cause of concern. And that's why they call it a novel virus, as a cause of concern, and why they're taking this approach. The same thing with swine flu, same thing with SARS in the past, because, Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, MERS, was another issue back in 2012. I'm saying, right after we had the H1N1. So these things, some things that are common, I'm saying coronaviruses are common, but when it leaps like that and there's no proven immunity on our part to the virus, then that's when it becomes cause of concern for public health. And this is why you have medical researchers scrambling to see, okay, what's going on? We have to sequence the genome and see how this thing came about. And the genome has been sequenced since December, January, of this year, starting in China, before we got wind of it and started to research it back in March of this year. What I'm saying? And one thing I did in one of my live streams, I went through the actual genome and I broke down each component, and I show people, what each component relates to as far as the makeup of the actual virus itself. And there's different types of viruses. You have DNA type viruses, RNA type viruses, and they all interact with the body differently. And like Elihu says, the most major concern is the mutations in regards to these viruses. So once we understand the mutations that are happening, that will let us know the efficacy of the vaccine that we are distributing to the public. All right. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good. I want to give Karis the opportunity to jump in on some of the things that Brother Ron Shields said, as well as Dr. Elihu. Would you like to share some of your thoughts before he gets back?
I definitely appreciate his background and the medicines that are really non-traditional, because I think just like a lot of us, for me personally speaking, I have my black seed oil, I have my burdock, and I have my sea moss. I have those traditional, the traditional medicines to try to stay away from the pharmaceutical type medicines. Now I do respect the pharmaceutical medicines, but we have to be responsible for our bodies, and of course it's mainly what we eat and staying true to eating to stay alive, just not eating to eat, and that's where a lot of us, especially up until this year, we understood, well, if I can do my feast days, I'm keeping Sabbath, well, that means I can get a whole bag of potato chips. And that's something that we are really, as a community, we're doing a whole lot better understanding that. And honestly, it's just because of the external pressures and forces that are making us think in a more holistic and natural way. So again, I tend to look at things. I'm skewed. My bias is skewed, and my bias is always in numbers. But again, if you can't prove the numbers to me, then what good is numbers that's published? And that's where I look at that, because I'm always at the point of a number represents something. Even our social security numbers represent a person. So whatever you have on out there, you have to have it backed up. And of course, if there's anything that's hidden, then guess what? It's going to be met with some sort of a critiquing. And usually those critiquings, they do turn into a conspiracy theorist, type of agenda. Because here's the thing, we appreciate those agendas a lot more in the Black community, because see, the Tuskegee was, that quote unquote conspiracy theory. Oh, these Black folks don't know what they're saying. And then 10 years later, guess what happens? They're having that with in a movie. It's on BET. When I'm speaking to my mom about things, so she's a registered nurse, and she's like, yeah, we still have the folks in St. Louis that was exposed to radiation back in the 1960s, and that was in Black communities. And see, all throughout the time that we've been here in this nation, we have always been the medical guinea pigs. This is really the very first time that Black folks as a whole has really said, we're not going to take this.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. Yeah, because a lot of times, we have been quiet about it for fear of, just we're already been the outcast of society, but, just not wanting to disrupt the apple cart. And so trusting in a system that has already shown us again and again and again. I mean, it's been 400 years. We see they've never done us any good. Why would they start now? And that's one of my biggest questions that I was wondering. How is it that we're advocating for reform in healthcare? We're advocating for reform in policing, in the justice system. We're advocating for equity and finances and pay. And none of those things, they go on deaf ears. They're all unheard. But all of a sudden, you care about us so much that you want to inject us with a vaccination for a virus that, according to Dr. Elihu, has a 92% recovery rate on its own. So that's what makes it, for me, a lot. It's very suspect. I don't trust your motivation.
And I think that's absolutely correct. And that's justified awareness. Some people would say justified paranoia. But the fact that there is a 92% success rate is really interesting. I mean, when you look at the 8% that don't, the question is why? What were the conditions that predicated them not surviving coronavirus infection and succumbing to the pathology of COVID-19, and a lot of times, a lot of those details are not given to the public. The medical community, scientific community may have access to a lot of these things, but the general public does not. So we have to rely upon the experts to disseminate that information to us and trust that they have our best interests at heart when they share this information to us. So some things that I do want to share, again, like I said, and I appreciate Covered in Awakenings being honest and say, yo, my bias is skewed. And that's good. When somebody puts it out like that up front, you can appreciate that, because that they're being honest, right? And the only thing with me is that because I don't profess to be a medical professional, I don't want to give anybody any advice on what to do. I'm just here to give you the information and that they can make the decision themselves with the information that they've been provided. Right. So if you don't mind, can I share my screen, Ashanda?
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Elihu just sent something to me. Do you have to do it through the private, or can you just put it up and then I can include it?
Yeah, I could just put it up and you just include it. All right, so
Okay.
I want to share. Yeah, I want to share this real quick. You'll see it. All right. Oh, by the way, this product here on the right, highly recommend it, but that's another conversation, right? And it has to do with uh, making your immune system a bit more robust, right? Because what it does is that it increases the cytokines, and cytokines are little signaling messengers that's sent between cells for different actions to take place, especially amongst your white blood cells. And Cogniplex comes from a company called Standard Process, and they make excellent items when it comes to various different things, not just for virus protection, but for everything else, any other kind of ailment you could think of. Excellent products, highly recommend it. But like I said, that's a different conversation, right? But on the screen here, you see something that says very inconsistent, 2 allergic reactions in the UK to COVID-19 vaccine puzzle researchers. Now, one thing I guess some people may know and may not know is that there is a particular item that is in certain vaccinations, and I'm not saying it's in the COVID-19 vaccination, but there are what we call gelatin. And the purpose of gelatin that is added in vaccinations is because it helps to maintain or stabilizes it during transportation and storage and against extreme heat and extreme cold temperatures, right? And that's why gelatin is put in certain vaccinations. And, vaccinations such as the MMR vaccinations, they have a yellow fever, zoster, rabies, all of these tetanus, even tetanus, right? Pertussis or what we call DTaP. All of these vaccinations have gelatin in them. There's even a website on the cdc.gov that showed you the listing of the dosage that you get and the amount or concentration of gelatin in these various items, right? So that may be a cause of concern for some people when they do get it. You know what I'm saying? Like even the nasal vaccinations they had, because all vaccinations are not inoculations, right? Some of them is oral, some of them are nasal, but you can inhale it. And those especially are derived from pork. You know what I'm saying? A lot of other ones as well, because you can make gelatin out of fish, you can make it out of beef, or you can make it out of pork. You know what I'm saying? But that's just something for people to be aware, because if you have a religious disposition that states that you are not to come into contact with anything that is not kosher, and you get a vaccination or your children get a vaccination that violates that, then what side does would the court rule on? Is it going to rule in the favor of public health or the First Amendment? And that's a grave cause of concern, because now flu shots are mandatory in a few states, you know what I'm saying? Which is crazy, because now some people who are opposed to it can't send their children to school, you know what I'm saying, unless they get something with gelatin in it, and that's used to stabilize the vaccine, But on my screen, the reason why I'm showing this to you, because I want to read just a few up to this right here, and then I want to show you something from the FDA website. So a lot of times, whenever disseminating this information, and I say this to people in my community, so we can be responsible and be taken seriously with the assertions that we make before we establish into an actual claim through our research methodology, is to always get your data as much as possible from verified sources, right? Now, we know that there's going to be a tinge of agenda in a lot of mainstream media. I mean, we all are aware of that, right? However, if you dig enough, you'll see that even in mainstream media, there are a lot of journalists that actually reveal a lot of very good information. The thing is that it just doesn't get front page headline, so, it'll be something that's tucked all the way in the back in a small little square section and maybe the second to last page, you know what I'm saying? But they're there. So what I try to do is I try to look for these things from accredited sources, and for authors who had experience in that particular field, maybe somebody that's worked in a pharmaceutical field or somebody that has done interviews with people in that profession, etc., and try to utilize their articles to best represent an objective perspective as it pertains to things that are in opposition of the mainstream view that vaccines are 100% safe. Now, vaccines, according to the studies that they've been put through, and again, Elihu pointed it out, that there's billions of dollars that's placed in pharmaceutical research, right? And through pharmaceutical research and the standards that they've set, it's been proven that vaccines are at least 95 to 98% safe and effective, right? That's what the figures is, right? However, if you put $1 billion into research that is not funded by the pharmaceutical company, will we get the same results? Right? So that's another thing altogether. But the main thing that I'm concerned with people who do have allergic reactions. Now, if you want to look statistically, allergies is extremely high in our community. And if you get into deeper into what allergies is, a lot of allergies, especially ones that are linked to like atopic dermatitis or asthma, are caused by what's called type 1 hypersensitivity, right? And then you have type 2 hypersensitivity, et cetera. And pretty much what this means is that the immune system responds the wrong way when it comes into contact with any kind of antigen or anything that can possibly cause harm to the body, right? You have different types of antibodies, which Eliyahu had mentioned earlier, and you have some that are already in the immune system that are just generic ones that can latch on to anything that is an antigen or something that is outside the body coming in. And then you have some that are specialized based on your adaptive immune system responding to any kind of infiltration, right? Now, in this case, with people who have allergies or allergic reactions, there's some kind of shift that occurs in the immunity that causes the body to produce the wrong antibodies in response to other items that come into the body, whether it's ragweed, dander, bacteria, viruses, whatever the case may be. Your body produces the wrong antibodies, and the wrong antibodies causes a cascade of events that then your body becoming the causal agent for the symptoms of disease that actually make you worse or put you in a state where your health, degrades. And that's the main thing that we have to look at, because a lot of these vaccines, guess what, have been exempted when they did the trials from people who have allergies. And this is done purposely, right? Because you got to understand, if you're rushing a product to market because there's a political campaign that says, this virus is going to kill everybody, all these people are dying and so forth, and then you have this thing fast-tracked all the way from the executive branch, fast-tracked, monies are being poured in and everything. If you start to test a bigger sample size, because we can go and look at the numbers about the amount of people that have allergies in the U.S., then you'll see that, you're going to have an issue when you start testing in those people, because then you're going to be like, oh, okay, well, looks like this thing is not working as planned. We're going to have to take some more time. However, if you've been given billions of dollars, especially relief money, you have to produce something. And therefore, what you do is you create a sample size, right, that does not include people with allergies. And I'm going to show you all this from the FDA website for the Pfizer vaccine. I'm not making this up. I'm just going to show it to you, right? In this article, the person published 2 British people with severe allergies apparently had allergic reactions to the Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine, raising questions about whether it is safe for people with pre-existing allergies. In response, British regulators advised those with severe allergies to what? Avoid the vaccine. Now, I didn't write this. It's there, but as we read the article, we're going to go to another source, right? It says it was not immediately clear what triggered the allergic reactions. So I'm not here telling you it was the vaccine. I'm not saying that to you. I'm just reading to you what's here. Unlike some vaccines, in the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, there are no preservatives or egg products which have been known to trigger reactions with other types of vaccines, which gives you and put you in anaphylactic shock, right? Allergic reactions were not a significant problem in the U.S. trial, in which more than 20,000 people have received both 2 doses of the vaccine, but the U.S. trials, kept out subjects who had severe allergic reactions, said Monsef Slawi, co-head of Operation Warp Speed, the government program tasked with developing, manufacturing, and distributing COVID-19 vaccines. Now, that's interesting, because I don't see that on CNN.
Hold on. So you're saying, okay, so when they were going through, and Dr. Lyle, you can actually assist us with this. When they were going through their testing, their trial testing, they deliberately kept out people who had already had allergic reactions in the past 2 vaccinations, or just allergies altogether, is what they're saying. Dr. Lyle, could you speak to that a little?
I mean, brother, you're on it. You're on it. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. So you know, there's a whole lot of unknowns. That's just the whole thing. We don't know. And I have a close acquaintance that has rheumatoid arthritis, right? And that person is extremely concerned about how this vaccine is going to affect them, right? And so people with allergies, people with autoimmune disorders, um, pregnant people, we don't have any data on how this vaccine is going to behave in these patients. So, you hit it on the head, man.
And again, I'm not saying that the vaccine is no good. I'm not saying the vaccine will not work for some people. That's not what I'm here to say.
No, it really works for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's just me being honest. Even though I'm not going to take it, but I have to also be objective, right? So all I'm saying is that it can be helpful in certain cases, and I'm saying most people should focus on health and wellness. They should learn diet, supplementation and exercise, and know how to intertwine these things to fortify your body to be prepared for even what we call strains, because you have a process of mutation that occurs when you have two strains that recombine. They're called recombinant viruses, right? Where they co-infect the cell. There are different mutations in the viruses. They co-infect the same cell, and during the process of reconstruction, either in the RNA or DNA, depending upon what type of virus we're talking about, you have portions of both different strains of viruses recombining and creating a brand new virus. Now, some cases, it may not work because the machinery may not be fully functional and the virus budding off and going and infecting another cell. And sometimes it take time for that to happen. But in some cases, when the right pieces get together, it is actually effective. It buds off successfully and it infects another cell. And therefore, you have a new strain in the wild, right? So what do you do with your immune system in the interim until another vaccine comes out? Because remember, these vaccines that were created were tested with a particular strain of the virus. So recombinant possibilities that occur or mutations that occur over time, which means we may have to take this vaccine every season, right? In order for us to be fully fortified against it. So again, I'm not telling nobody to not take it. I'm just saying, me personally, I rather focus on good health and wellness best practices. And let's say it was something more detrimental. Let's say that it was something like Ebola, something crazy like that. That would be a little different story. You know what I'm saying? Then maybe I may consider it, because we see the death rate is pretty high for that. You know what I'm saying? Success rate is very low. That's different. But in a situation where it's 92% success rate and you're pretty healthy, it's like, you got to weigh it out. But check this out. I myself had severe allergies when I was much younger. I took matters into my own hands after speaking to my ENT doctor and figuring out how to handle it on my own. And after I was able to successfully take care of it, I went back to the doctor and he verified that whatever I was doing was improving. And my allergic reactions were less severe over time, to the point where I barely really get, really bad allergies anymore. But let's say, for example, it was a time period where my allergies were really bad. And let's say that I'm being pushed to go get this virus, and nobody's telling me that there's a certain sample group that's being kept out of these trials because they have to rush it to market. It's not like they're being irresponsible purposely. You got to understand the pressure, right, that's on this market. And just like Ellie said, this is a competitive market where they're trying to make money. And if you've been given a grant to do something of billions of dollars, you know what I'm saying? You got to produce something. And there's a timeline. You got to produce something. So unfortunately, some corners have to be cut. And this is why there's a big public distrust, right? So let me show you guys something real quick. And then, I would love to have anybody else chime in, because I think this is something that should be front page, and it should just be honest. It's not for fear mongering. I'm not trying to scare anybody from not getting the virus. The vaccine. What I'm simply saying is just consider, if you have severe allergies, like the doctor said, LEU, if you have pre-existing conditions where you have autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis is one of them, where the body attacks its own joints and it has a buildup of fluid that needs to be drained frequently unless you get surgery, etc. You should just be aware of these things. And or guess what? Whenever there's a vaccine, there's a little insert. And when you open up that insert, guess what it tells you? It gives you a caution, and it tells you who should and who should not get this vaccination. It's right there in the insert. So we can't fault them for deceiving us if we don't take the time to research. Because before you get it, they're going to say, well, did you take time to read the insert? It was there. You decided you didn't want to read it. So how can we be responsible? It was there. You know what I'm saying? And whenever in the past I would get the vaccination years ago before I got into health, I would always ask the doctor, hey, is there any ingredients? Can I see what it is you put in? You put it in me? He's like, well, we have to go get it. You know, we typically don't get people asking about that. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a big problem now. You know, and this area was mostly black and brown people going there, and I seen them just getting shots, nobody's asking anything, just getting shots. And a friend of mine, actually, he did go into anaphylactic shock back in 2008 when he got a vaccination because he had some severe pre-existing conditions with allergies, rhinitis, and a couple other things. And he went into very, very severe anaphylactic shock, and it took maybe about a couple of days in the hospital to get him out. Now imagine if, and the lucky thing is he lived close to the hospital, so the time they rushed him there, they got him there in time, and he was all right. But let's say, for example, he was in some remote area, in the U.S. somewhere, and he's like maybe 15, 20 miles away from the hospital. You understand what I'm saying? Like those are very grave concerns. And I think that doctors need to be responsible when they're looking at their patients and say, look, we know there's a virus out here. We know it's a serious ordeal. But in your case, I would recommend that you continue to keep gloves, masks, and social distancing until herd immunity kicks in. It may take a year, it may take 6 months. We don't know. But in your case, I don't think that the benefit is going to outweigh the detriment, But let me show you guys this real quick. I'm sorry, Ashanda, and I'll get out your way.
Okay, real quick before you do, I have a question here that I would love for either one of you to answer. Dr. Elihu, if you could give your thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on those who have MTGFR mitochondrial dysfunction mutation, A1298C homozygous? Are you familiar with that?
No. I mean, no. I mean, I'm just going to be frank and honest with you. I've never heard of this disease before. Mm-hmm. It sounds like it's an extremely rare disease. But, and my background is orthopedics. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, so I'm about as far from genetic mutation diseases as you can get.
Okay. Yeah. That seemed a little big to me. I never heard anything like that, but I said, let me go ahead. You're the doctor, so let me ask you. Brother Ron, have you heard of anything like that?
I've never heard of that either, and I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just a secondary researcher. So I don't know what that is. However, I'm familiar with mitochondrial dysfunction. I mean, we see that also heavily in cancers as well. Mitochondrial dysfunction, which prevents the cell from going through what's called apoptosis or programmed cell death. So there are some mutations that happen in cells that predisposes the cell to become cancerous. And that is what we call hypoxia or hypoxic injury that occurs to the mitochondria. So I don't know if that's linked. I'm not sure. I mean, there's no context. It just threw a term out there and it's expecting us to respond. I would love whoever's saying that to give us some context, to give us a reference to a medical journal or a scientific article or something like that. So, I mean, even Eliyahu, who's a medical doctor, can give you more feedback. I mean, that was like, and this is not to discourage whoever did it. It just, I mean, that's random. Like we don't have a context for why that's being brought up. So it's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead and share that link that you want to share.
So what I want to show everybody is, I'm going to show you this real quick, right? Anybody could Google search this. I have these articles because every time a vaccine comes out, I always get the insert from the manufacturer's website or from the FDA website. I do that all the time. So I'm on top of everything that's out, every batch that is distributed from every brand, every manufacturer. I have a whole archive of this, and it goes back for about 30 to 40 years. And the reason why I keep it for so long back is because, if somebody was suffering from something, based on an injection for a particular batch that was recalled, let's say 30, 40 years ago, through their medical records, they can trace it back and see if they'd actually got that, and that can be a cause for a medical malpractice suit. You know what I'm saying? So I try to do what I can to help the community. Like I said, I'm just a secondary researcher, but I try to stay on top of things so that way, if I can share something to help somebody or save a life, then I'm here to do that. That's my obligation according to Torah. But if you go to the search engine and just type something in very simple, I want you guys to see this so that way you're aware of actually what's going on. Let me share my screen again. Here we go. All right, so you can share it if you don't mind, Sister Ashanda. All right. So if you look here, you type in COVID-19 vaccine contents and you put Fiverr. What you want to do is click on right here. Now, I tell people about the CRAP test. Any of you who've been to universities or college, I've been to college as well. You learn what the CRAP test is. So the CRAP test is a method that you use to vet a source to see if the source is objective, if it's non-biased, what is, who created the source and why. Is there an agenda involved? Is there any funding involved? What kind of language do you see? Do you see inflammatory language in the source? So the CRAP test is very important for you to vet a source, right? When it comes to us being responsible, talking about things in regards to the medical industry, and I'm just saying this for those of you who are researchers, you have to be very careful, right? You can't come off to say, well, I'm a doctor, or act like you're a doctor. I say, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a secondary researcher. But you have to rely on primary research, right? As a secondary researcher, somebody that's not actually in the lab doing this work, you have to rely on primary research, right? And primary research that's been conducted and that's using the gold standard in order for it to validate the mode of action and even the mechanism of action when it comes to certain ingredients that are being used to show forth efficacy against various diseases and, viruses, bacteria, etc. Right? Long story short, use the CRAP test to vet sources before you cite them. All right? That's very important to be responsible. And if I'm wrong, Dr. Eliyahu, you can correct me on that.
Again, nail on the head.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Elder. I appreciate that. So when you type this up, the FDA.gov is going to be one of those sources, right? Whether you have conspiracy theories about the FDA or not, that's going to be one of those sources. However, guess what? They do tell the truth. The difference is, like I said, it's just not going to make the headlines. Okay. Now check this out. All right. This right here is the fact sheet for healthcare providers administering vaccine. You're going to say, well, how do you know about that? Well, I know somebody that's an epidemiologist that works at a Walgreens in New York and that works with dispensing vaccines. Right. This is somebody I've known a long time before I even got into the health thing. And they always say to me, go to the FDA website. And that's where you're going to get the official documentation as it pertains to what we are instructed to do, that we have to implement, because it goes from the federal government, the FDA, to the state's implementation, all the way to the local level as well. And there's regulations. And these things are outlined. The guidelines are outlined by the FDA. So this is how I learned to research like that, by speaking to people in the industry. Right. I'm not just a Joe Blow, just say, oh, let me just go research things because I have an agenda. But I speak to people in the industry. That's called doing your primary research, people who's actually doing that work, and they share information with you. Right. And here it says the emergency use of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine to prevent coronavirus. Right. Disease 2019. Right. Now, let's scroll down. Let me show you something. Right. This all has to do with preparation, which is extremely important, too. Remember those trucks that you see that's keeping all of those vaccines? They have to be temperature controlled. You can only have but so much G-force on those vials. I mean, all of that is important before you get an injection, right?
Can you zoom in a little bit so we can see?
No problem. I got it. All right, let me know if that's better.
Much better.
Okay. So all of that is important, and logistics is important, and how you get something from one point to the other, and the condition or the integrity of that vial as it's in transit, right? That's extremely important. But guess what? We never ask these questions. We just line up and get shot with inoculations. All I'm telling people is ask questions, do your research, right? It's important. That's your obligation, not the doctor's obligation. That's your obligation, right? And the doctor is to coach or assist that, right? So if you scroll down to dilutions, right, because you have to have it diluted, again, it breaks everything down, 1.8 milliliters to remove air from vial. Are we vetting that they're doing everything according to these guidelines, right? This is important. They should know that, but how do you know who's going to be working that day, who's administering to you? Did they just come out of school? They just finished their internship and say, all right, I'm about to shoot some people up, and they don't have experience. They're not being watched by somebody that's more senior. What's going on? What is the environment in which you're getting the vaccine? All of that is important for you as an individual that's going to have something that can be injected in you and can alter your life. It's important. But if you scroll down, let's get to the part about allergies, right? Here's the warnings. Appropriate medical treatment used to manage immediate allergic reactions must be immediately available. When you sit down to get a vaccine, do you say, hey, if this doesn't go right, do you have medical treatment that's immediately available in the event that I go into acute anaphylactic shock? You got to ask that before they shoot you with something. They might say, wait, hold on, let me check. If they say that to you, that's a problem, right? You need to ask these questions, but you won't know unless you read this or somebody presents it to you, right? It says, and this is for almost all vaccines, it says in an insert, it says reaction occurs following the administration of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. This is standard practice in the industry, right? Watch this. Immunocompromised persons, including individuals receiving immunosuppressant therapy. A lot of people who have cancer receive immunosuppressant therapy. You know, when you get your chemotherapy or your radiation, guess what? That's immunosuppressant therapy, right? So if somebody has cancer and they're at stage 3, should we give them the vaccine? Well, according to this, they should not get it. May have a diminished immune response, obviously, because you are restricting the immunity to the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. So if I am immunocompromised, right, the objection is, how can we go through the process of what's called immunomodulation to get my immune system back to healthy levels before I will be able to get any benefit from a vaccine? Like, this stuff is important to act and to investigate, right? It says, watch this, Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine may not protect all vaccine recipients. What? Wait, hold on. Vaccine may not protect. Wait, may not protect all. So how do we know if it's going to protect me or not? Well, hold on. Is there a study attached to this or some additional information? No? Oh, wow. That's interesting. So before you get that inoculation, say, hey, wait a second. I read this in an insert. How do I know which category I fall in? Is it going to provide me some degree of protection? Will it not? What is it based off of? Can you give me some kind of measurement or some kind of gauge so I know before I get inoculated?
Brother Ron, can you put this link in the chat for
Yes,
those of us who want to grab a hold of it?
Well, you know I can't, sis, because I'm not an admin and it won't let me put a link.
Oh,
I gotta be a mod to put a link. Yeah. But what I can do is,
if I could jump in real quick. I'm sorry.
Yes, Ellie.
absolutely.
And so I think this kind of goes back to the last question that Ashanda was asking me, because, I mean, you've done a tremendous amount of research, and I'm telling you, you're on it. But when we're talking about the masses, we do need to find a pathway back to trust, a pathway back to where people, don't necessarily have to have that level of education in order to make an informed decision about whether or not they're going to take the vaccine. And that's actually where I come in and I say, that this awakening is of major import. And one of the things I'd like to actually propose for you, Brother Divine, is, we have methods of studying things. We may not have the funding, but we do need the studies on all of the different naturopathic interventions, all of the different methods, even on things like what I mentioned before, prayer. It does not have to be spooky spiritual. if God is real, if we're saying that we have faith in a real God, then prayer ought to have an effect, and we ought to be able to actually demonstrate that effect to a certain degree. At the same, and even with that, the science that we do up until now, based on the scientific method, everything has been based on what mankind thinks, what people who think that they're really smart think is going to happen and come up with. Um, I think a paradigm shift within the Israelite community could be a different way of approaching science. One where you find a question out in the community or out in the environment, and then you go to God about it. You ask Him, what is this? What is the hypothesis that you would have for me? And then you test that hypothesis out. And that will actually develop a community of, or I guess a field of study that can actually be balanced against some of this stuff that people just don't trust, and don't trust it for a very good reason. However, when we don't develop that undergirding, all we have is I don't trust whatever's there. And that's a scary place to be, because there's no alternative. Right.
Well said, Elder. And that's why we need elders like you who are in the medical field but are able to balance that out spiritually and be able to give us that type of informative response to these things. Because again, I'm not here to spook people out, to scare people, or do any kind of fear mongering. And again, you're right. Some people may not do this type of research, right? This depth of research in regards to this. I went to school for forensic psychology. You know what I'm saying? So this is definitely not my field. However, I learned research methodology from there, and it can be applied anywhere. And what I simply try to do is tell people, okay, you don't want to get to a point where you're asking questions ad infinitum, right? Where you're just asking it forever and you don't make any decision because you're always asking questions, critiquing everything, and nothing gets done, right? It is the approach that you take, because there should be some kind of end result that you're seeking for, right? And if we are the people of Yah, then the end result should be having an Edenic state of mind, body, and soul, right? Because when we are cleared of fear, right? Because the Most High has not given us the spirit of fear, right? When we purge fear from ourselves and we say to the Most High, listen, I want my body to be a temple for you, right? I want to be the best representation of you. If I'm carrying your name, I want to be the best representation of you when the public sees me. So I want to keep my body healthy. I want to be aware of what goes in my body. I want to be aware of if I'm being misinformed. And if I'm not being misinformed, be honest about it. And like I said, as you can see, they're being honest about it. It's there. This information is there. These inserts are available. All you have to do is just pick it up, read what's there, because as you can see, there's not a lot of jargon in there. It's written very plain for the layman to access it and understand. And it's just to the point where you're not going in there and say, yeah, I want to beat up the vaccines and I want to show people why they shouldn't trust allopathic medicine. Nah, chiropractic, the field that Elihu is in, is very important. And that field right there is instrumental. Oh, you said what?
Orthopedics. That's
sorry, orthopedic. Orthopedic or chiropractor is an essential field when it comes to medicine, right? So all allopathic medicine is not bad. You know what I'm saying? And that's not what we want to put out there for the public, because that becomes very dangerous, because you people in situations where now they're fearful to go to any doctor and they have to live with pain and suffering or whatever the case may be. And it's simply because people have been dishonest with the dissemination of information and have not coupled it with a spiritual cushioning, right?
Well, that's an excellent point that you make. And that's something that Dr. Elihu and I were talking about earlier in our email exchange. And I was saying that based off of my own personal experience with my own children, that I've had a growing distrust for the medical community because of the experimentation upon my infant, and a lack of just humility and saying, just like he's been saying again and again tonight, if he doesn't know something, he says, I don't know, but this is something we can pray about. And unfortunately, in the medical community, you don't have too many doctors that are willing to do that. So that's why having him here is so beneficial.